Hey, good afternoon. It's Dr. Leslie Wakefield, Pelvic Health Physical Therapist. This is Lunchtime Live. I do it every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern, and where I answer questions about pelvic health and women's sexual health specifically, all of the above. And today I'm coming to you from a random parking lot because I left the house too late and I didn't make it to the office on time. So hopefully there's nothing too distracting because I'm like a squirrel these days, and if I see something shiny, I'm going to get totally off track. So the question I'm answering today has to do with strengthening the pelvic floor. It's two questions, and I thought they piggybacked after each other very nicely, and I think they're very common questions. Even if you've never been to pelvic floor PT, you don't even think you need pelvic floor PT, my guess is that most women have wondered these questions at some point. And those questions are, number one, should every woman, any woman, be strengthening their pelvic floor as good practice, good wellness, good fitness? And second question, are Kegels the only way to do that? Because that's kind of boring. But it's the most common thing that most of us know about. So I'm going to answer the first question, should every woman be doing pelvic floor strengthening? And the answer is no. It's not appropriate for every woman or every person in general, and here's why. There are some pelvic floor dysfunctions that occur when the muscles are too tight. There are also pelvic floor dysfunctions that occur when the muscles are not active enough. So let's imagine you can have an overactive muscle or an underactive muscle. An example of an overactive muscle are those people that are booty clenchers. You can see them clenching their butt all the time, or people whose shoulders are always up around their ears because their neck muscles are so tense and they couldn't relax it if they wanted to. It always feels sore and tight. That's an example of overactive muscles, muscles that have just gotten tight over time and at this point stay that way. You wouldn't necessarily go straight into strengthening the neck if you're walking around like this all the time. That actually might make the problem worse. Same example for the pelvic floor. If you happen to be a person who's running tight in the pelvic floor, who has an overactive pelvic floor, um, strengthening is not going to be your first step. Now, eventually, is that going to be necessary? I would think so, because a tight muscle is not necessarily a strong muscle. In fact, usually an overly tight muscle is weak functionally. But you don't want to go straight into strengthening. That could exacerbate the problem. That's where we come in as pelvic PTs, and we can help teach you how to relax it, how to regain your natural elasticity and reactivity of those muscles, and then give you the correct and safe strengthening exercises. So that would be an example of a person who's strengthening the pelvic floor. Going straight into strength might not be the best choice. Other examples are perhaps there's scar tissue. Maybe you're postpartum and you had a perineal tear or an episiotomy. Definitely we want to get you doing some strengthening, but if there's sensitive scar tissue there or restrictive scar tissue, your strengthening exercises might not really be effective, or you might find them uncomfortable. In that case, we wouldn't throw you straight into strength. We might do some scar tissue work, some fascial release, some mobilization work for your pelvic floor, and then lead you into safe and comfortable strengthening exercises. People with pelvic pain might not be the best fit to go into strength. Strengthening exercises might irritate that pain. So, short answer, no. Not every woman should just assume, or person, everybody has pelvic floors. Not every person should assume that strengthening would be the best thing for them right now at this age, at this stage. How do you know? I mean, we would love for you to come see a pelvic floor PT, but if you find yourself in any of those categories that I just mentioned, you might consider that you might want to get an evaluation versus if you feel totally healthy and everything is perfectly fine and you've just never done any strengthening before, it could be a good fit for you, and maybe you can jump right into it. But I think everyone should have an evaluation by a pelvic PT. I'm super biased because that's what I do. So then the second question was Kegels. Is that the only way to strengthen your pelvic floor? Again, the answer is no. Kegels are great. They're a really nice introductory tool. The word Kegel, it's actually named after a doctor back in the way day. It's basically pelvic floor contraction followed by a pelvic floor relaxation. It's a squeeze. You're doing a pump. of the muscle. And that's a nice way to start kind of any strengthening program, is just learn to find that muscle, make sure you can activate it and relax it properly. But there's so much more than that. In terms of really direct, right at the pelvic floor isolation exercises, definitely Kegels are a nice start. You might want to try fast contract, relax, or quick flicks. You might want to try more of endurance holds. You might want to try, I call it a ramp up and a ramp down, or going up the hill, down the hill, so slowly building the contraction and then coming back off of it. You might try little stair steps. So squeeze, squeeze stronger, squeeze hardest. So there's lots of ways to play with that sort of basic isolation activation exercise of the pelvic floor, and that's a wonderful way to start where you don't need any equipment. Please just make sure you are relaxing completely in between your contractions. We don't want to wind up in that category of overactive or tight muscles. When you do a contract, you want to make sure you follow it by a relax, no matter what kind of contract it was. But there's other things you can do. People have heard of vaginal weights. That's kind of, it's easy to sell. It's a fun tool, so we see it a lot on social media, and there's a place for that. I wouldn't say, and the studies do not show that it is more effective than any other mode of strengthening, but it's a nice way to mix it up. And to be fair, it is a nice way to add load. So in that case, you take a little weighted ball or oblong, and you insert it through the depth of the pelvic floor, sort of like you would a tampon. And it typically has like a little string or a little plastic piece that comes out, so you can remove it easily. And you hold it. And you can increase the resistance by increasing the weight. You can increase the work by holding it for longer. You can increase the work by holding it during activities. My one precautionary thing with using the vaginal weights is your pelvic floor is not intended to grip long term. It's a postural muscle. It is slightly active anytime you're in gravity. It needs to be. It's supporting your organs. It's working with your respiration, your breathing. It's controlling your pee and your poo. So yes, it is active all the time, but it shouldn't be gripping all the time. And when you use a vaginal weight, anytime that weight is inside you, and you're holding it against gravity, you're gripping. So it's not the most functional, the most specific way to train your pelvic floor, but it's a nice tool, and it's a nice way to add variety, and it's a nice way to add resistance and increase strength. And there are some people that might be super functional for. If you're a really heavy athlete and you know your pelvic floor has to withstand really heavy loads and you're looking for a way to add resistance, this is a great tool for you. And it's also a way, like I said, to add variety. If you're super bored of your Kegels, this is one thing that you can do to mix it up. Other great tools are some of the Kegel trainers, and I consider that even more of a biofeedback device. There's so many brands. I'm going to list a couple. Please don't think that I'm leaving anybody out or that one is better than the other. I do have my personal favorite, which is the Kegel, but they're all pretty much the same. There's the Parafit. There's one called Evie. There's the Kegel that I love. There's probably 10 different brands at this point, but essentially what they are is it's something that you insert into your vagina that can sense pressure. You hook it up to an app on your phone, if you don't mind Bluetooth on your vagina. Some people mind, don't use this, but if you don't mind, it's a nice tool. And you basically play games on the app. It's like Tetris with your pelvic floor muscles. It's playing Mario Brothers with your vagina. It's entertaining. There's lots of different programs. It keeps you engaged. And most of those programs do offer option for a fast contract, a slow contract, a ramp up, endurance holds. And I love that because it adds variety. And because you're watching the screen, it's giving you moment-to-moment feedback on if you're doing it correctly. One of the major pros of that is you can see if your contraction is correct, and you can see if you're actually relaxing all the way. Are they perfect? No, they are not. They are just a tool. They are not the same thing as having a qualified medical professional checking your activation patterns. but it's a really nice home tool. So I consider that both strengthening and coordination work, and I love it. I think that as long as you have enough strength to activate the pressure sensors, which not everybody does, but if you have enough basic strength to activate the pressure sensors and you have enough coordination to be able to engage with the programming and not feel frustrated, it's a great tool. I have had some patients come in for their first or second visit like, hey, I have this at home, should I use it? And when I check their pelvic floors, I find that they are so weak that they can't necessarily activate the pressure sensor. That can be frustrating. I also sometimes find that they're using some other like muscular strategies. Maybe they're bearing down by accident, like pushing down, which is the opposite of a Kegel or a contraction, that might fire off the sensor a little bit and give them the false impression that they're doing it correctly. So that's my only precaution. It's not a guarantee that you're doing it right, but it's a really nice check. If you have such low strength to start, or you don't know where those muscles are, it might not be the best tool because it's going to be frustrating. It's not going to give you the feedback that you're looking for. The reason I like the Kegel specifically is because it actually inflates inside. So you insert it and then inflate this bulb. And that bulb, I feel like, can accommodate different vaginal widths and sizes and elasticities. And then it seems like a more accurate read, but that's just my personal opinion. I've tried a few. Currently, that's my favorite. That's the one I have at home. So let's see, we talked about Kegels, we talked about mixing up the Kegels using different types and speeds of contractions and holds. We talked about vaginal weights, which are a tool, not necessarily better than any other. They do have pros and cons. There are drawbacks to using the vaginal weights. We talked about the the Kegel trainers, like the Parafit, the Kegel, the LV. And there's the jade egg, which is very popular right now. They're beautiful. They're very natural stone. Please make sure you clean them well because some of them are porous. For me, the jade egg, just from a mechanical perspective, fits into the same category as the vaginal weight. It functions as a weight for your pelvic floor to resist. Some people are using them for other purposes, properties that they believe the stone carries, energetic purposes, meditation purposes, awareness building. You could certainly insert a jade egg and do pelvic circles and learn to feel more sensation inside your pelvis and inside your vagina. It's a wonderful tool for those things. I'm only talking about pelvic floor strengthening. For me, purely in terms of strengthening, the jade egg falls into the same category as the vaginal weights. Other ways to strengthen. If you come in to see a physical therapist and they find that you have extremely low activation, you're really having difficulty finding or using those muscles, we might use electrical stimulation. As far as I know, there's not really any good home electrical stimulation options. I have had patients come in with some that they purchased for wildly expensive, like unbelievable how much they spent on these things. And I didn't like them. I didn't find them to be safe. I didn't feel like the patient understood how to use it. I think they hurt themselves using it. It was too strong. So I would love to hear if you guys know of any home electrical stimulation options that are out there now. For me, that's a tool I prefer to keep in the clinic because the last thing you want is to zap yourself. I mean, you're not going to hopefully hurt yourself, but it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's not a good experience that you want to have. Also, if you have basic activation, if you have basic coordination, you don't need it. It's not going to help you. Adding that electrical stimulation is not going to increase your results. It might just increase your sensation and your awareness. So it's a tool. It's a tool we use in clinic. It's not one I use with everyone because I don't think it's useful for everyone. There might be better tools out there for you. And then lastly, I'd like to say these are all really isolation strengthening concepts. When I say isolation, I mean working those pelvic floor muscles separate from anything else. When you're doing your Kegel, you're actually really trying to relax the rest of your body. You're trying to tune in and really find the pelvic floor muscles and isolate them and learn to contract and relax them. And all of these different strengthening methods that I just talked about have that same concept. They're isolation exercises. The truth is, your pelvic floor works in conjunction with a lot of other muscles in the rest of your body. It should. Like I said earlier, it's a postural muscle. It moves and activates based on your breath pattern when you're breathing. If you're breathing hard or soft or relaxed breath, it works with very specifically your inner thigh muscles, your glute muscles, and your abdominal muscles. But it contracts and relaxes based on your position and gravity. You know, if you went from sitting to standing, it contracts and relaxes based on if you've got like some gas coming that you want to control, or you really have to urinate. It works all day long in conjunction with both your organs, your breathing, and your other muscles, working muscles, skeletal muscles. And so there's really nice ways of training the pelvic floor functionally. Functional training is kind of a hot term, and I love it. You're training the body to work for what it needs to actually do. And there are great ways to do that with the pelvic floor. So I don't want people to get stuck on just Kegel, 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 my weight, my weight, my weights, my trainer, my trainer, my trainer. Let's also work the pelvic floor with your breathing. Let's also work the pelvic floor when you're doing your gym exercises, your hip bridges, your Pilates, your squats. And there's ways to do that well. And then I also see some ways to do that I think maybe aren't so good. You know, really intelligent Pilates that includes both a contract and a relax is a beautiful way to receive cueing that includes your pelvic floor with the rest of your core and the rest of your body. I've also seen some less intelligent ways of training, not to say that it's bad, that sounds terrible, less intelligent ways of training. I'm sorry to anyone I just offended. I guess what I mean is less therapeutic styles, less cognizant of the contract and relax and some of the health components that go into the pelvic floor. Somebody help me say that better. That sounded awful. But there's some, I've been to some Pilates classes where it's always about grip, 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 grip. And gripping the pelvic floor without relaxing is not a great idea. So just be careful what classes you pick and who your instructor is. And if you've got pelvic floor issues, make sure to be smart about it. But Pilates is a nice way to do that. Some yoga classes are really good at cueing pelvic floor. When you're doing weight training, especially heavy weight training, it's a really good idea to purposefully include your pelvic floor in some of those contractions. They should all be working together on its own, but to do it consciously and with really good intention and awareness, that's a great way to include your pelvic floor. So isolation exercises, wonderful. Functional, including pelvic floor and other functional movements and your sports and your other activities can really augment pelvic floor activation and function and strength, and it's including it in everything else that you're doing, which is such a more natural way to work anyways. I had one other one. I missed it. I'm in the car, so I didn't bring my notes with me. It's about functional training of the pelvic floor. I forget. I'll include it later if I think of it. So, long story short, recap, here we go. The questions were, should every woman, every person be training their pelvic floor for strength? The answer is no. Second question, are Kegels the only way to strengthen the pelvic floor? Again, the answer is no. And to hear back those answers, I'm going to post this video. I put it back up on Facebook, I put it on YouTube, and I use clips of it on social media. So feel free to go back and rewatch. I love questions. Having questions from real people enables me to answer questions that real people are asking versus kind of what I'm assuming people are wondering. So I love engagement. I love questions. If you found this valuable, please like. If you'd like to hear more like this, please subscribe. And again, submit any questions you want either during the week or live, and I will do my best to answer them. Every Wednesday, 12:30 Eastern Time. It's Lunchtime Live with Dr. Leslie Wakefield. Headed to the office. I will see you later.